don't understand how the hell this thing works, man.
Very simple, Bob.
It doesn't work when I do it.
Blow.
Doesn't work when I do it.
Okay. Rolling take 4.
You can say a lot of things about me, but you can never say that I wasn't committed to the motherfucking bit. Because what do you mean I'm dressed like Bob Dylan at 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday? So welcome back, or welcome. If this is your first time here, I really wish I could wear the sunglasses for the whole episode, but I can't because of the lights. This makes me want to get a bunch of people together and do a Bob Dylan bar crawl. Like, would that not be the funniest thing in the world? This bar crawl moving through, but it's just like 10 Bob Dylans. Some have whistles, some have harmonicas. Hopefully no white guys are saying the N-word with a hard R. That would kind of dampen the vibe. I'm gonna make this happen someday. I'm Abby, and this is Vinyl Monday. The who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. You know the drill. Unless, of course, you don't, in which case you picked one hell of an episode to turn up at, because ladies and gentlemen, guys and dolls, cretins of caves, this is the last regular episode of Vinyl Monday Season 4. This is a huge album celebrating a big anniversary. This week's album is Bob Dylan, Highway 61, Revisited. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next albums are gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Oh, wait, I also have a written review of the new Analog Productions pressing of Wishbone Ash Argus on trackingangle.com. You can check that out as well. Alright, now that the housekeeping is done, albeit quite chaotically, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a reissue. This is the stereo version of Highway 61 from 1967. That's important to note, as without the extended fade-outs at the ends of songs, my copy of Highway 61 is a whopping 4 minutes longer than a mono edition. At the very beginning of lockdown in 2020, I ordered 4 albums on Discogs to get me through. Rust Never Sleeps, Pearl, Vanilla Fudge Self-Titled, and this. Pretty solid selection.
I'd like to know about the cover of your forthcoming your album. The meaning of the photograph with you and the wearing a Triumph t-shirt.
What would you want to know about us?
Barry Feinstein, Ken Reagan, Henry Diltz, Elliot Landy have all taken iconic photos of Dylan. Jerry Schatzberg is my personal favorite Dylan photographer. The Highway 61 cover was photographed by Daniel Kramer. He also took this portrait of Bob, this photo of Bob and Sarah at a shack in Woodstock, and the Bringing It All Back Home cover. In the Highway 61 cover, Bob is dressed casual in a blue and purple silk shirt over a Triumph Motorcycles t-shirt, the kind of bike Bob would crash in Woodstock about a year later. Dylan and Kramer spent the day walking around the city taking photos. They even bought Bob some clothes to wear, but this is what he showed up in. At the end of the day, they ended up at manager Al Grossman's place. Dylan sat on the stoop. Kramer decided the light was still good enough and started snapping. He asked Dylan's buddy Bob Newirth to get in the frame, but he didn't actually want him in the shot so much as he wanted the color of his shirt. Kramer had an eye for color. These reddish-orange stripes are complementary to the blues and greens of the lighting and Dylan's shirt. I don't hear enough people talking about this red, green, blue, orange axis, but it ensures a striking photo. Color theory, people! On the back cover, we have some black and white snaps from the studio and liner notes written by Bob himself in a slightly more comprehensible extension of his tarantula writing style. On Highway 61 Revisited, we of course have Bob Dylan on vocals, guitar, piano, harmonica, and fire whistle? Bob's backing band for this record comprised of Mike Bloomfield on electric guitar, Paul Griffin and Frank Owens on piano, Al Cooper on organ, Harvey Goldstein, aka Harvey Brooks, on bass. Russ Savakis also plays bass and double bass on Desolation Row. Bobby Gregg on drums and Bruce Langhorne on tambourine. Our special guests include Charlie McCoy playing guitar on Desolation Row, Joe Macho Jr. playing bass on Like a Rolling Stone, and Tom Wilson producing. The rest of Highway 61 Revisited was produced by Bob Johnston. Roll transition. On the state of his friend Bob Dylan in 1965, David Blue said, quote, "One day he was a respected young songwriter. The next he was this thing, the voice of a generation, the man with all the answers. People were at him all the time. Tell me what to think, tell me where to stand, tell me who to be. It was relentless. You or I couldn't have stood that kind of pressure." Straight up, this episode's narrative is going to be dominated by two things: one song and one performance. Beginning with the song. Though his accounts have changed many times over the past 60 years, Dylan's never been the most reliable in interview.
All right, let's go.
I don't remember a thing about Rolling Thunder.
Okay.
I mean, it happened so long ago, I wasn't even born.
His stories have retained the spontaneity of writing like a Rolling Stone. It was written after his tour of the UK through May and June of 1965, immortalized in the film Don't Look Back.
Threw that glass in the street.
Yeah, this is
Who did it? I don't care who did it, man. I just want to know who did it.
The lyrics were written either on the plane ride home from tour or as soon as Bob got home. It depends on who and when you ask. Bob said it, quote, was very vomitific in structure. It seemed like 20 pages, but it was really 6. You know how you get sometimes. The first crack at recording Like a Rolling Stone took place on June 15th, 1965. Now, 3 big things shaping the rest of Highway 61 happened during the recording of Like a Rolling Stone. Number 1. Dylan invites guitarist Mike Bloomfield to record. Mike's first impression? I thought it was just terrible music. I couldn't believe this guy was so well-toted. I wanted to meet him, cut him, get up there and blow him off the stage. Clearly, their meeting went a little differently than Mike expected. Dylan had decent enough blues chops. Back in England, he jammed with John Mayall and his Blues Breakers, featuring You Gotta Be Kidding Me. The first day in the studio, June 15th, didn't work out. Everyone reconvenes and comes back the next day. Mike blows into Columbia Studios with his guitar and without a case. Who saw him stumble in without his guitar case? Number 2, organ player Al Cooper, who wasn't actually an organ player. Producer Tom Wilson invited Al to watch the session. Quote, "In 1965, being invited to a Bob Dylan session was like getting backstage passes to the 4th day of creation. Al thought he was gonna weasel his way in and play some guitar, but then Mike showed up. Original organ player Paul Griffin moved to the piano, leaving the organ open. Tom Wilson gets a phone call, has to leave the control room in a split second. Al makes one of the most decisive and steel balls moves in all of rock and roll history, one that will change the course of his life forever. Al sneaks into a Bob Dylan recording session to play an instrument he doesn't know how to play. Though he was, quote, fumbling his way through the changes like a little kid fumbling in the dark for a light switch, it was somehow good enough for Bob. The third big thing that shaped Highway 61. Like a Rolling Stone was Bob's last session with Tom Wilson. Stories are vague on both sides, but point to a blow-up between the two guys regarding Like a Rolling Stone, and Dylan, in that particular Dylan f*** you way, requesting Phil Spector to oversee future sessions. The full 6-minute Like a Rolling Stone was released as a single on July 24th, 1965, with Gates of Eden on the B-side. This single's impact on rock and roll history cannot be overstated. Think about what else was on the radio at the time. Sonny and Cher's I Got You Babe. I got you, babe. The Beach Boys' California Girls. I wish they all could be California. Wish they... Unchained Melody. Whoa, my... and a shit ton of Dylan songs. Hey, Mr. Tambourine, play a song for me. All I really wanna do. Like a Rolling Stone peaked at number 2 on the Billboard singles chart, only kept off the top spot by the Beatles. Dylan saw the Beatles occupying the entire top 5 the week of August 4th, 1964, with 7 more songs in the rest of the Hot 100, and had replicated it to the best of his ability. By Mark Polizzotti, quote, exit the Woody Guthrie jukebox, enter Rimbaud with a Rickenbacker. The very next day after Like a Rolling Stone was released, Rimbaud with a Rickenbacker, or a Fender Strat, made his debut. There's one big thing cleaving Highway 61's timeline in half, and it's shaped a lot like the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. That's because it was the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. Whole books have been written about this one weekend. One of those books was adapted into a film starring Timothée Chalamet, which I saw opening weekend dressed as Bob Dylan. I don't want this video to become a video about Newport, but I also can't ignore Newport because it is a big part of the legacy of Highway 61. What we can all generally agree on is that there was a Newport Folk before 1965 and a Newport Folk after 1965. Before 65, it was a folk festival. Friday and Saturday were workshops, which we hardly hear about anymore, dominated by traditionalists. Joe Boyd, sound guy at Newport Folk, phrased the fest's appeal best. Quote, invitations represented an opportunity to appear before thousands of the most aware and influential kids in America, to say nothing of the worldwide media. Like knighthoods, they were seldom turned down. The winds were changing. The 1965 Songwriters Workshop was the first not to bear predominantly topical material. A healthy dose of fate went into Dylan's set. The Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Electra's first rock group, was set to play, but they got rained out. Poor scheduling bookended Bob with very old-school acts. This resulted in a mixed crowd of people who went to see everyone but Bob Dylan, and people who went expressly to see Bob Dylan. Mimi and Richard Farina requested a backing group, but it didn't pan out. Everyone forgets about Mimi and Richard in this situation. Had Bob not done what he did, their set probably would have been the defining moment of the festival. And Phil Ochs! Everybody forgets about the Phil Ochs of it all. One detail I learned that challenged the narrative of the whole 1965 Newport Folk Fest for me was that Phil Ochs, one of the folkiest folkies to folky at this time, was not invited to play this year of the festival. So the idea that Dylan plugged into an entirely unplugged world is false. He was not the first electric set at Newport either. The camps are not as black and white as one might have you think. However, it does seem like Bob showed up looking for a fight. He didn't bring an acoustic guitar with him to the grounds that night. He had to borrow one from someone else. His green polka dot shirt he wore to sound check was such an important symbol of the weekend, a Complete Unknown's costume department insisted upon Timothy sporting one. On the day of, Bob wore a black leather jacket, a salmon shirt, peg-leg black pants, and the Cuban heels that would become synonymous with him. His positively Carnaby Street getup, quote, drew to himself the whole shebang of the teenage rock and roll revelers whose screams and squeals of ecstasy as the performer came on stage were all too obnoxiously apparent. The physical fight over Dylan's set is a myth that probably comes from Alan Lomax and Al Grossman getting into it over one slighting the other's act. Pete Seeger and the Axe is also a myth. That comes from him participating in a workshop demonstration earlier in the day. Like I said, Bob was not Newport's first electric set, but it was the loudest. By today's standards, it would be nothing, but this is 1965, and not exactly the crowd to be experiencing Vox speed lamps in person. Was there cheering? Were there hecklers? Was it a mix of both? Did he stun Newport into silence? Even the footage is unreliable, as it's been edited to hell. What story you get depends on who the storyteller is and where they were on the grounds that night. Quote, there were upward of 17,000 people in the audience, with every seat and space on Festival Field filled, and another 2,000 to 4,000 listening from the parking lot. What anyone experienced depended not only on what they thought about Dylan, folk music, rock and roll, celebrity, selling out, tradition, or purity, but where they happened to be sitting and who happened to be near them. The broad generalization of this night, which I tend to agree with, is that Dylan's set drew the line in the sand between the old heads, who believed folk music was by the people and for the people, and the new kids on the block, using the folk music format to articulate their concerns. Still for the collective, but not in the same way. This is the for the collective between the 60s folk revival and the hippies. In any way, Newport Folk was the live debuts of Like a Rolling Stone and Phantom Engineer, soon to be reworked into It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry. Back to recording Highway 61. After Newport, Bob got back to writing at his place, just outside Woodstock, New York. But wait, now that Tom's gone, who's gonna produce the rest of the LP? Terry Melcher was in the running. Can you imagine a collaboration between Bob Dylan and Terry Melcher, the guy producing The Byrds? He was outbid by Bob Johnston. The guys went back into the studio 6 weeks after the Like a Rolling Stone sessions, presumably riding high on the single's success. Tombstone, It Takes a Lot to Laugh, and single Positively 4th Street were recorded on July 29th, as was A Crack at Desolation Row. Buick 6 came the next day, July 30th. August 2nd were Thin Man, Queen Jane Approximately, the title track, and Tom Thumb's Blues. And Desolation Row started as an electric song, but was re-recorded at the last minute, either on the 2nd or the 4th. It, of course, became an acoustic number in that re-record, without Al Kooper, with Charlie McCoy. The track listing of Highway 61 Revisited goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Like a Rolling Stone, followed by Tombstone Blues. Then It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry. Next, From a Buick 6, and side 1 closes with Ballad of a Thin Man. Opening up side 2, we have Queen Jane Approximately, followed by the title track, Highway 61 Revisited. Then, Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, and the album closes with Desolation Row. This is where things get a little dicey. Wikipedia and streaming services say August 30th, 1965. However, other sources I've cited, including Harvey Kubernick's piece for Music Connection, specify orders of Highway 61 were shipped out on August 30th. In any way, we can safely assume Highway 61 was released 60 years ago this week-ish. And we have not seen immediate, universal, critical praise for an album like this since we covered Sgt. Pepper's. This is rock and roll's skeleton key. It would be silly to spend 5 whole minutes of our runtime listing every single notable essay that has sung this album's praises when we will be moving through all of that ourselves. Hell, Grail Marcus wrote a whole book about Like a Rolling Stone alone. The most quoted praise by far, though, is by our tank top wearing hero from last week, Bruce Springsteen.
The first time that I heard Bob Dylan, I was in the car with my mother. We were listening to, I think, maybe WMCA, and on came that snare shot that sounded like somebody kicked open the door to your mind from Like a Rolling Stone.
Like a Rolling Stone is obviously named Rolling Stone's greatest song of all time. Quote, "To this day, the most stunning thing about Like a Rolling Stone is the abundance of precedent, the impressionist voltage of Dylan's language, the intensely personal accusation in his voice, the apocalyptic charge of Cooper's garage gospel organ, and Mike Bloomfield's stiletto-sharp spirals of Telecaster, the defiant 6-minute length of the June 16th master take. No other pop song has so thoroughly challenged and transformed the commercial laws and artistic conventions of its time for all time." Later, quote, "Just as Dylan bent folk music's roots and forms to his own will, he transformed popular song with the content and ambition of Like a Rolling Stone."
What's your new book about?
Oh, it's about,
Where do you even begin with Highway 61? Every rock critic worth their salt has something to say about Highway 61, and this thing has been out for 60 years. That's 60 years of critical commentary to stand up against. Having the supreme misfortune of being so late to the party, literally anything I say about this album will feel redundant. All I really have, or any of the critics past a certain point have, are our very individual experiences with Bob Dylan's material. When people ask me who my first love was, I say Bob Dylan. Because when I first discovered his music at age 19, it flipped the switch to my consciousness. Not once in my life have I felt comfortable or at peace. There are so many coexisting facets of myself, I can't possibly be content expressing just one. I must wear costumes. I have to change. It's in my nature. I contain multitudes. It's why I love Neil Young now that I'm older, and why I loved Bob Dylan when I was younger. For the first time in my life, I heard someone else speaking my language. I thought I was the last of a lost civilization until I encountered Bob's work. I started listening to Bob through the Manchester Free Trade Hall bootleg. The themes, the sound, the set list, the group, the perfect combination between Highway 61 and Blonde on Blonde, that entry point is crucial to how I perceive Bob's work. As is how I first heard Manchester, Blonde on Blonde, and Highway 61 soon after. On a road trip. Let's start with something I do not do anywhere near enough of on this series. Album title analysis. From the man himself. Quote, "Highway 61, the main thoroughfare of the country blues, begins about where I began. I always felt like I'd started on it, always had been on it, and could go anywhere, even down into the deep Delta country. It was the same road, full of the same contradictions, the same one-horse towns, the same spiritual ancestors. It was my place in the universe. Always felt like it was in my blood." Dylan said Highway 61 felt like home because it kinda was. It passes through his hometown of Duluth, Minnesota. Revisited, though, is a little trickier. Bob himself had to fight Columbia to get revisited in the title. Al Kooper described recording Like a Rolling Stone as, quote, "totally punk. It just happened." Joe Boyd and Mark Polizzotti made punk references as well. One of the core tenets of Bob Dylan, I'd argue, is pissing people off. See Newport Folk, Self-Portrait, his Victoria's Secret commercial. Seriously, what the hell was that? This was the kid voted most likely to join Little Richard's backing band in his high school yearbook. He brought a Strat, what Buddy Holly played, to Newport. Revisited is essential to the thesis of the album. Dylan insisted in interview that this was not a musical departure, not a deliberate middle finger to the folkies. Polizzotti said, quote, "What Dylan has abandoned in Highway 61 Revisited is not his sense of outrage or protest, but but the illusion of community. Joe Boyd picked this up and continued it, quote, like the acmeist poets of Russia in the 20s, he confused and frightened commissars with his opacity. He was no longer outer-directed. Outer-directed meaning topical songs, pointing outrage at a specific thing. 65 Dylan onwards is so difficult to pin down because he, she, they, it, we, you, I are rarely static in his songs. This was due in part to the stuff he was reading at the time. Kerouac, Ginsberg, Burroughs, Blake, Rimbaud. He was writing his own book, though he kept kicking that can down the street. The secret ingredients of Highway 61's music are Bob Johnston, Al Cooper, and Mike Bloomfield. Highway 61, Blonde on Blonde, John Wesley Harding, and Nashville Skyline were all produced by Johnston. He did wonderful work outside of Bob as well. Shout out to Songs of Love and Hate. The only producer who could capture that Thin Wild Mercury sound was Bob Johnston. What made Thin Wild Mercury? Al Cooper's playing, which alchemized any given song's arrangement into the mid-60s Dylan magic. However, Thin Wild Mercury couldn't exist with Mike Bloomfield. It's what makes Highway 61 unique amongst the mid-60s Dylan output. His playing is simply too hopped up to fit any descriptor of thin. Wild? Sure. God, Like a Rolling Stone could be a whole episode in and of itself. It's taken up most of this one already. It's so difficult to explain Like a Rolling Stone because it feels so fundamental to me. Like, how do you verbally explain to someone how to walk? Let's start with some more title analysis. Like a Rolling Stone. It could be a nod to Muddy Waters' Rolling Stone.
Yes, I feel. Baby, like a low down hill.
The song the Rolling Stones name themselves after, or a nod to Hank Williams' Lost Highway.
When I passed by.
Bob described the lyrics as, quote, a rhythm thing on paper about my steady hatred, directed at some point that was honest.
Like, in Like a Rolling Stone, you're pretty hard on the girl. Are you hard on them because you want to torment them or because you want to change their lives and make them know themselves?
I want to needle them.
Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, threw the bums a dime in your prime, didn't you? People call, say beware doll, you're bound to fall, you thought they were all kidding you. Bob had little sympathy for the poor little rich boys and girls of the world, but that's pretty ironic considering he grew up middle class and fairly comfortable. So who is this song about anyway? Is it Edie Sedgwick and or Andy Warhol? A Chrome Horse certainly sounds like a factory creation, but almost definitely no. Dylan didn't make contact with these people until the fall of 1965. It would certainly be compelling if this song were directed towards Marianne Faithfull, quite the self-fulfilling prophecy, but I haven't found any concrete evidence to suggest this. Bob takes glee in this person learning independence the hard way, having to make deals like the rest of us. You say you never compromise with the mystery tramp, but now you realize he's not selling any alibis as you stare into the vacuum of his eyes and say, do you want to make a deal? A gritty, sleazy, Faustian bargain. Notice how I'm not tripping up on any of these lyrics because they just flow so easily. That's part of the magic of Bob's writing. It's automatic. Like his writing exercises, it just happens. The treatment is mean as hell, meaner on the page than in recording. It's a little cruelty, a little compassion, but the delivery is just the right balance of manic joy. He takes delight in someone who pushed other people down to get ahead, tripping and falling themselves. But don't we all do that to get ahead? Didn't Bob himself do that to, I don't know, Joan Baez? A delightfully condescending begins, princess on the steeple and all the pretty people, they're all drinking, thinking that they've got it made. Exchanging all precious gifts, you better take your diamond ring, you better pawn it, babe. Best line delivery on the whole album is that you better pawn it, babe. It sounds like he's got a big fat smile on his face and 2 middle fingers in the air. I think Like a Rolling Stone is, in part, a response to the hordes of people hailing him as the voice of a generation, asking him where to stand and what to be. He takes this space to criticize everyone who did everything they were told by parents, peers, partners, and society, and are miserable because of it. Because if you followed all the rules and ended up with a miserable life seeking external validation, well, that's your fault, dummy. The thesis of the whole song, though, is there's nothing more freeing than being invisible. When you've got nothing left, you've got nothing to lose. It evokes been down so long it looks like up from here. There's a little Richard Farina for you. The next lines have spawned the titles of countless biographies and biopics. He gets to wailing it like a man possessed by the specter of himself we perceive him to be. From Grail Marcus's epic piece on the song, quote, "How does it feel?" doesn't come out of his mouth. Each word explodes in it, and here you understand what Dylan meant when he said, "I had never thought of it as a song until one day I was at the piano and on the paper it was singing, 'How does it feel?'" Dylan may sing the verses. The chorus sings him. As for the music, ramshackle perfection. It sets the scene for Dylan to deliver his vomitorious and spiteful, I love that word now, vomitorious, but joyful masterpiece. It sets a bright scene for Dylan to lay his vomitorious and spiteful, but joyful masterpiece to tape. Mike Bloomfield was kept on a tight leash for Highway 61. None of that B.B. King shit, but he adds the musical commas to Dylan's ramble. Al's organ is just screaming over the top. Dylan breathlessly wheezes into his harmonica. The tambourine places this thing firmly in the mid-1960s, but Paul Griffin on piano gives this arrangement its color. Bobby Gregg gets his credit for the but I love the thunderous rip-rolling into the choruses. This is one tight group. Listen to how they rise in anticipation through the pre-chorus before returning to the defiant, "How does it feel?" It was a superb choice to follow Like a Rolling Stone with Tombstone Blues. Bob Johnston said Dylan was in charge of the sequencing. He's building the world of Highway 61 with his sheer onslaught of music and words. It's unrelenting and raucous, like a train car party full of skeletons. Punchlines like, "The sun's not yellow, it's chicken," came from Dylan's own tarantula. Author Robert Shelton interprets the King of the Philistines putting jawbones on soldiers' graves as being Lyndon Johnson. Operation Rolling Thunder was in full swing in 1965. Puts the Pied Pipers in prison and fattens the slaves, then sends them out to the jungle would certainly fit. The scene of John the Baptist and the Commander-in-Chief is a more direct nod to the Prez, but to say Tombstone is about Vietnam would be reductive. It paints a broader picture of senseless violence, corruption, and abuse of power. See a fraudulent national bank and Jack the Ripper hiding his killings behind the mask of being a member of the Chamber of Commerce. Dylan's not so explicit, but he is still political. The train car party slows down at the crossroads. The guys grab their ladies and sway to It Takes a Lot to Laugh. Our boy Bobby is absolutely trying to romance a lady. Don't the moon look good, mama, shining through the trees? But if Joan and Sarah's little hospital run-in was any indication, our narrator already has a lady at home. Don't my gal look fine when she's coming after me? He stepped out on her and she is coming for his ass. I'm always very interested in how Bob portrays women in his songs. Mike Marcusy said, quote, "Sexless Ophelia or the hungry women of Tom Thumbs, frigid or predatory, elite or earthy, unattainable or attainable, and either way, despised, or resented. You could use Bob Dylan's discography as a prime example of the Madonna whore complex. The lover of It Takes a Lot to Laugh is not the glamorous nymph with an arrow and bow. She's not a prostitute either. I wanna be your lover, babe, I don't wanna be your boss is an example of something truly rare in Bob's writing. The narrator seeing a woman as his equal, not putting her up on a pedestal or pushing her to the ground. Of course, he follows this up with some standard issue contempt. Don't say I never warned you when your train gets lost. Can never be too straightforward. Dylan's never been known as a good singer, but this is one of his strongest vocal performances on Highway 61. Paul tickling the keys and Mike interjecting with a memorable, relaxed, swaggering riff highlight how comfortable Bob sounds on these stretched out notes. The loping, easy tempo, honky-tonk piano, and laid-back drumming are a hint of Dylan's burgeoning interest in country music. He wanted to collaborate with Johnny Cash as far back as 1965. We are rocking and rolling into From a Buick 6, which is a prime moment for our ensemble cast. Bassist Harvey Goldstein rumbles along, hitting all his marks, with Bob jangling away and a bleeding harmonica solo. Mike's licks electrify the memory of Robert Johnson. She Keeps This 410 All Loaded with Lead is a nod to the 3220 blues. Highway 61, Pass Through the Delta. Buick 6 is another ode to a lover, this one a little rougher around the edges. A junkyard angel, soulful mama, laying the blanket over his body on his deathbed. Loose lips sink ships, so she don't make him nervous, she don't talk too much. She's a badass in her own right. She walks like Bo Diddley and she don't need no crutch. She's the Bonnie to his Clyde. A real ride-or-die bitch. Another woman our narrator sees as his equal. The bitter, stately funeral procession of Ballad of a Thin Man starts with Paul's, Mike's humid ambling, and Al's sweating bullets in church organ make it all the more imposing. Dylan adopts a certain greasy, sleazy smugness for the Thin Man. I remember Polyphonic had a phenomenal Thin Man breakdown that had to be like 7 years ago at this point. He really leans into the sexual overtones of the song. The pencil, the sword swallower, the geek, the cow, and the milk. He also goes into who Mr. Jones might have been. Journalists Jeffrey Jones or Horace Judson, Howard Alk, etc., etc. I don't know why anyone would claim this song was about them. Ballad of a Thin Man is a song you do not want to be about you. You walk into the room with a pencil in your hand. You see somebody naked in you. You say, "Who's that, man?" You try so hard, but you don't understand just what you will say when you get home. The rhyme scheme, with the last line always rhyming with Jones, creates a feeling of inevitability. It's always gonna come back to Mr. Jones. Dylan said to Robert Shelton, quote, "Mr. Jones is like a very weak, well-to-do person." Elsewhere, quote, "He's a real person. You know him, but not by that name." Everybody knows a Mr. Jones. A pompous ass, a killjoy, a bore, a hypocrite, proudly toting his checks to tax-deductible charity organizations. That bridge is another favorite line delivery on the album, percussive, syncopated force. The disgust with which he says, "You've read all of F. Scott Fitzgerald's books," is truly impressive. Dylan isn't too serious. He's laughing in the first line and hurls, "There ought to be a law against having you around. You should be made to wear earphones." It's such a blatant, impish thumbing of the nose, you can't help but laugh. The defining recording of this song is far and away Manchester 1966. I played it on my Hippie Hour segment. Bob is just spewing venom at the audience. In that moment, everyone in that theater was Mr. Jones. Queen Jane approximately is the most blonde on blonde song on Highway 61 because A, it's the loosest, and B, it's the most stoned. The band sounds lightheaded, a little drowsy, and the guitar is delightfully out of tune. Our narrator attempts to show this idealistic woman the realities of her situation, where her optimism is no good. He's gentler with her than the subject of Like a Rolling Stone in hopes she might accept him into his world. Won't you come see me, Queen Jane? Though he needles her a bit, he makes a bid for her affection. I feel like Queen Jane is kind of a non-starter of a side 2 opener. Don't get me wrong, it's a great song, and I understand why it opens up side 2. It's kind of like a foil to Like a Rolling Stone opening side 1. But when you compare it to the song to come after, God said to Abraham, "Kill me a son." Abe said, "Man, you must be putting me on." God said no. Abe said, "What?" God said, "You can do what you want to, Abe, but next time you see me coming, you better run." It's Bob's interpretation of the story of God, Abraham, and his son Isaac. It's the greatest opening lines of any song in rock and roll history. Not for the content, but for the delivery. You can tell a story straight, but your delivery colors in the picture. Verse 2, with Georgia Sam and Poor Howard, leans to a commentary on race relations. Mac the Finger and Louis the King are pictures of American consumerism and it wreaking havoc on the environment. Red, White, and Blue Shoestrings and 1,000 telephones that won't ring just getting dumped on the highway. The Roving Gambler verse once again calls out warmongers in the White House. Bob making this his title track is a strong statement. It's his extensive commentary on the state of America in the mid-1960s, but again, it doesn't lose its fun. That goddamn whistle! A complete unknown claims Bob bought it on the street. Al claims it was his. Whoever brought it in that day, it is boisterous and stupid and fun. Oft overlooked, though, is Dylan's humming at the end. Worthy of any blues master. Tom Thumb feels out of place, but Mike and Bob's breezy guitars hint at Bob's fixation with the south of the border exoticism he'd play out on Desire. It's pretty. The narrator is a stranger in a strange world, taking comfort in hungry women who will make a mess out of you and his sweet Melinda, who is almost definitely a lady of the night. And finally, Desolation Row. Words like pretty and beautiful don't typically go together with Bob Dylan. His lyrics at this time made their home in the abrasive and strange. You guys probably know by now that I am fascinated with endings and destruction. Loss of innocence, end of days, Hindu god Shiva, Hades, and the Greek underworld come up over and over again in my writing. Which is why I think Desolation Row might be New Orleans. The end of Highway 61. The land is wet, fertile, and green. Locals live among above-ground graves. Death is part of the city's history. Death isn't to be feared here. It's another beginning. I who have sat by Thebes below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, etc., etc. They're selling postcards of the hanging. The first line is based on a true horrifying event that took place in Dylan's hometown of Duluth about 20 years before he was born, where 3 black men were falsely accused of rape and lynched by a mob. A photo of the townspeople posing with their bodies became a postcard. The crime wasn't officially recognized by Duluth until 2003, a whole 73 years after these men were wrongfully put to death. All these authors, including Mark Polizzotti, go on about how dark Desolation Row is. As the song progresses, detail piles upon detail, image upon image, compelling one to listen, to keep going forward, even as the air through which one is moving darkens to the point of impenetrability. That's the best excerpt of his whole text, by the way. Despite the grotesque imagery Dylan uses, hangings, debauched circuses, executions, heart attack machines, illuminating the darkest corners of American history, I find Desolation Row to be an oddly comforting song about the end. Lady and I look out tonight on Desolation Row. Even if it's fleeting interactions like Romeo barging in on Cinderella sweeping, a scrap between T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, who I think are stand-ins for Alan Lomax and Al Grossman, you're never truly alone. This interpretation might have something to do with how I first heard Desolation from Manchester. That performance was dark, mystical, and weary. Though Charlie's flourishing guitar is quite romantic, and might be a little much at times, I can't shake that tired-eyed romanticism I once heard. It's a prime example of Dylan's surreal world. Cinderella, Bette Davis style, the Phantom of the Opera, Casanova, a handful of Shakespearean characters rub shoulders with Einstein disguised as Robin Hood. They sniff drain pipes, recite the alphabet, love each other, hurt each other. Some are not name-checked. I'm convinced the passengers of the Titanic shouting, "Which side are you on?" is a nod to Pete Seeger and the Newport folk folks. They mill about with faceless characters who are making love or else expecting rain. Their lives go on amidst this madness. We are not the Cinderellas or Casanovas. We are these people. These are faces and names we'll never know because our narrator gave them the Picasso treatment. I had to rearrange their faces and give them all another name. Moments like that, where Dylan breaks the fourth wall, are magical. If Masters of War off Freewheelin' was Bob's picture of the apocalypse, Desolation Row is his gentle, romantic, horrifying, beautiful guide to the end. A phrase I've been obsessed with lately is connective tissue. They're beautiful words for one. Connective. It moves from the back of the throat to the tip of the tongue and the teeth and back again. Tissue, sounding soft and ending in one of my favorite vowel sounds in the entire English language. It's the connection between Roy Orbison and George Harrison, Roy Orbison and Bruce Springsteen, Dylan and Springsteen, Phil Spector, the Ronettes and the Beach Boys and the Beatles and Dylan, Dylan and the Byrds, the fact that Eric fucking Clapton is mentioned in this episode. The connective tissue is what Vinyl Monday is all about. Dylan telling Mike, "I don't want you to play any of that B.B. King shit, none of that fucking blues," is pretty ironic considering how indebted to the connective tissue Highway 61 is. It's an appreciation of Dylan's intertwined roots, from the Delta blues to the anthology of American folk music, rock and roll, even a lick of country. Though Dylan has a reputation for being an iconoclast, he's always been looking back. See Love and Theft, Shadows in the Night, Triplicate, him continually re-recording his own stuff because he's basically the modern American songbook. The pavement is laid with winding word command, obscured morals to the stories, and a wily cut-the-shit band plays us through, but you never travel the same road twice. You get older, wiser, meaner. You might get left behind at the rest stop a time or two. It's not any of our trips home, it's Bob's, but on my first listen after several years away from Highway 61, it felt warm and cozy. Is Highway 61 quintessential Dylan? I don't think there is a right answer to this question. There have been so many Bobs across the Johnston-produced stuff alone. He contains multitudes. For 50 minutes, we get to travel the confusing, hostile world of 60 years ago with Bob. If Blonde on Blonde is Bob's photo album, Highway 61 is his road diary, a nod to the authors on his bookshelf and in his phone book, all the people he loved and betrayed. What of that diary is fiction and reality? Who fucking knows? 60 years later, Highway 61 Revisited is still smart, challenging, at times goofy and weird. Just enjoy the ride. My personal favorites off this one are Like a Rolling Stone, Tombstone Blues, Ballad of a Thin Man, Highway 61, and Desolation Row. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week, and that's it! That is the last regular episode of Vinyl Monday Season 4. That was Highway 61, 60 years later. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Bob? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11. Will I see you next week? Will I see you the week after? That is contingent on if this finale wants to fight me like the rest of season 4 has. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the season finale. Bye! Now I gotta return me back to the cigarettes.
And my mother, she was no stiff with rock and roll. She liked the music, she listened. She sat there for a minute and she looked at me and she said, "That guy can't sing."
Good God, I must leave right away.